Picture the wielder of the thunderous skies. He is glaring down at the lords of the earth, and he slams his fist onto a banquet table so hard the heavens literally shake.
Right, it's this moment of pure, terrifying, divine rage.
And he delivers a chilling threat. If they do not free their slaves, their fields will grow nothing but thorns and weeds.
But you know, it isn't just a myth, it's a warning.
Welcome to Veritas Antiqua. I am your host. Today we descend into the shadows of the Song of Release to uncover truths that have been buried for millennia.
We all think we know where fables come from, right? You picture a tortoise and a hare having a foot race.
Or like a fox staring longingly at a bunch of grapes.
Exactly, and you immediately credit ancient Greece. You think of Aesop. Or maybe you picture 17th century France and La Fontaine.
We're just so conditioned to believe that this specific brand of storytelling, using talking animals to deliver neat little moral lessons, is a distinctly Western invention.
But what if the true grandfather of the talking animal story wasn't Greek at all? What if, to find the origins of this tradition, we have to leave the agency behind, cross into the heart of Anatolia, and rewind the clock to a staggering 1400 BC.
It completely upends the timeline of human literature. I mean, we're talking about a period, a full millennium before Aesop supposedly lived.
A full 1,000 years. And the evidence for this doesn't come from some quaint book of fairy tales either. It comes from thousands of heavy baked clay tablets excavated from the ruins of Hattusa.
The ancient, sprawling capital of the Hittite Empire.
Right. And deeply buried within those physical archives is the lore of the Song of Release, or by its original name, Kasafi. It's a narrative of Hurrian origin that the Hittites preserved in their central records.
Which is really the core mission of today's deep dive. We want to use this ancient text to reframe everything we think we know about the Hittites. Because if you remember them at all from a history class, you probably just picture chariots.
Oh, absolutely. The quintessential conquerors of the ancient Near East.
Right. You picture a brutally pragmatic military machine clashing with the Egyptian pharaohs at the Battle of Kadesh. Bronze weapons, impenetrable stone walls, sheer physical dominance.
But we are going to look past that armored exterior today. We're diving into how this society used fables about clumsy deer and exhausted grinding stones to wrestle with some of the heaviest concepts of human existence.
Concepts like free will, the crushing weight of systemic debt, and the fundamental mechanics of social justice. And they were debating this thousands of years before anyone thought those conversations were even happening.
The Kasafi is remarkable because it isn't just a random assortment of animal stories. The structure is incredibly deliberate. It starts off with these very short, seemingly disconnected parables, which are referred to as misaller.
And if you only hear the first few lines, you might actually mistake it for a collection of simple folk tales.
You really might. But they're actually building a dense philosophical framework. The text uses these fables to tune your brain to a very specific frequency, laying down the rules of cause and effect before it launches into a massive apocalyptic showdown later in the narrative.
I want to look at how they build that framework, starting with the very first story, which is called The Deer and the Stone.
It's a brilliant starting point.
Let's set the scene here. The text takes us up into the majestic Sisalippi Mountains. It's a beautifully peaceful environment. There's a deer grazing, totally undisturbed.
Right, just existing in nature.
Exactly. But then the deer gets careless. It starts sprinting blindly through the rocky terrain, not paying attention to where it's putting its hooves, and bam, it trips hard over a sharp stone.
And it gets injured.
It gets hurt, yeah. And in a fit of absolute blinding rage, the deer turns around and starts screaming at this inanimate object, cursing the stone for getting in its way.
The impulse is universal. It's that immediate desire to project our pain onto an external target.
Okay, let's unpack this, because it's the most relatable thing in the world. Think about getting out of bed in the middle of the night, aggressively stubbing your toe on the leg of a coffee table, and genuinely glaring at the table like it has a personal vendetta against you.
We always blame the furniture.
Always. It's a completely irrational, emotional response to our own lack of situational awareness. But this ancient lore doesn't just let the deer throw a tantrum. It does something wild.
The stone actually answers back.
Yes. What exactly does the stone say to this furious deer?
The stone mounts a profound philosophical defense. The text tells us, the stone replies, "Why are you mad at me? I didn't come here by my own will. The Creator put me here. I am here by my nature. The fault is not mine."
I am here by my nature. That is a pretty heavy concept for a rock to deliver.
What's fascinating here is that it completely strips the deer of its illusion. What we are witnessing in this exchange is a 3,500-year-old debate over free will versus determinism.
Because the stone is arguing that it possesses zero agency.
Exactly. It is bound entirely by the deterministic rules of its creation. A stone's fundamental nature is to be hard, sharp, and stationary. It didn't choose to be placed in the Zilipi Mountains.
And it certainly didn't leap out to attack the deer.
Right. The creator, or fate, or the laws of physics placed it there.
So it's forcing you to realize that you can't blame an object, or even another person, if they are just operating within the strict bounds of their reality.
Precisely. The Kasafi is challenging our perception of cause and effect. It suggests that blind anger at the universe is foolish because the universe is just running on its inherent unchangeable rules. The stone is a constant. The variable was the deer's recklessness.
It demands you take a hard look at how often you look for a scapegoat in your own life. Like when something goes wrong at work or you miss an important deadline, your brain immediately scrambles to find the stone in your path.
You blame the traffic.
Or an internet outage or a coworker, yeah. Because cursing the stone is infinitely easier than admitting you were the deer running carelessly through the mountains. To find that level of psychological self-awareness carved into clay from 1400 BC makes it feel wildly relevant.
That psychological mirror is exactly the point. The text strips away the comfort of the scapegoat. It establishes rule number 1. You cannot assign false blame to things operating within their nature. And once that foundation is set, the narrative immediately escalates the stakes.
It moves from a wild animal in the mountains to the very heart of human civilization.
Right into human labor.
That brings us to the second parable, the grinding stone, and its owner. In this scenario, we move to a bakery, and we meet a heavy millstone. Its entire existence is just grinding wheat into flour day in and day out.
A completely relentless cycle.
Eventually, the stone is exhausted. It's physically wearing down from the friction. So the grinding stone snaps. It rebels against the owner and essentially goes on strike, refusing to work anymore.
And the owner's response here is brilliant because he doesn't resort to violence or anger.
He doesn't just smash the stone.
No, he doesn't. Instead, he explains the cold, mechanical causality of their relationship. He lays it out clearly. He says, if you don't grind the wheat, there is no flour. If there is no flour, I cannot eat bread.
Which means he starves.
Right. He tells the stone, if I don't eat bread, I lose my physical strength. And if I lose my strength, I won't have the energy to move you or maintain you anyway. We need each other.
I have to admit, hearing this, I'm highly suspicious of the owner's logic.
Oh.
Yeah, he frames it as, we need each other, but let's look at the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
The owner is the one consuming the calories. He's eating the bread, while the stone is literally being ground down to dust to provide it.
That's a fair point.
Isn't this just ancient propaganda? It sounds exactly like a boss at the top of the food chain telling an overworked laborer, hey, don't complain about the conditions, because if I lose my wealth, you lose your job. It feels like a very convenient moral lesson designed to keep the working class obedient.
Your skepticism is completely warranted. The power dynamic is undeniably lopsided. It is a lesson delivered from the top down. But the deeper conceptual takeaway the Hittites were emphasizing here isn't blind obedience, it's systemic interdependence.
How so? Because one is still clearly a tool and the other is a master.
Because the owner is openly admitting his own vulnerability. He is acknowledging that he is not a self-sufficient, untouchable god. His survival, his physical strength, and his dominant position rely entirely on the labor of the lowest piece of the system.
Oh, I see.
If you think about it like a massive ancient stone archway, the elite class might be the capstone, sitting high up and looking down on everything. But if the base stones crack under too much pressure, the capstone doesn't hover in midair, the entire structure collapses into rubble.
So it's less of a gentle partnership and more of a mutual hostage situation.
That's a great way to put it. The owner is teaching the stone, and us, that a society is a living organism. If the labor stops, the elite starve. The Kasafi is illustrating that human systems are fragile webs of reliance, regardless of how unequal the wealth distribution might be.
I'm trying to piece together the architecture of this entire lore. We have the deer story, which is a highly personal lesson about internal responsibility and not blaming fate.
Right.
Then we have the grinding stone, which is a societal lesson about the fact that the top needs the bottom to survive. These feel like we're building a legal argument, but I don't quite see who is supposed to be on trial here.
You've hit the nail on the head. They are building a legal argument, and it's preparation for a cosmic trial.
Oh, wow.
These parables are the preamble. The text has now established the laws of physics and economics. Take responsibility for your actions and understand that systems collapse if the base fails. With those rules firmly in place, the Kasafi zooms out from the kitchen in the mountains to a massive cinematic frame story.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This is where the narrative shifts from fables into full-blown mythology. We are taken to a divine assembly. Picture an enormous celestial banquet.
It's an overwhelming scene.
You have Tishub, the great storm god, the supreme wielder of thunder and lightning in the pantheon, sitting down at a table. But he's not hosting a friendly gathering. He is breaking bread with the dark gods of the underworld. The atmosphere is incredibly tense.
It is the ultimate high-stakes negotiation. Teshub hasn't convened this assembly to celebrate. He is looking down at the mortal realm, specifically at the city of Ebla.
And Ebla was a real historically powerful and wealthy city in ancient Syria.
Yes. But Teshub sees past the grand architecture and the elite's wealth. He looks at the ordinary citizens and sees that they are completely drowning in systemic debt.
Let's clarify what debt meant in the ancient Near East, because it wasn't just having a high credit card balance. The mechanics of this were brutal. If you were a farmer and you had a bad harvest, you had to borrow grain from the wealthy elite just to feed your family and plant the next crop.
It was a trap.
And the interest rates were astronomical, sometimes up to 33%.
Yeah.
If you had another bad year, the debt compounded. You couldn't pay it back, so you had to surrender your land.
And when the land was gone, you had to pledge the labor of your children.
And finally, when you had nothing left, you sold yourself into slavery to your creditor.
Exactly. It was a vicious downward spiral that systematically stripped the population of their autonomy. The people of Ebla have become the exhausted, grinding stones ground down to nothing. So at this divine banquet, Teshub issues a non-negotiable demand. He demands an Anandaranu.
Which is an ancient term for a massive systemic reset, right?
Yes, an Anandaranu was a formal decree of freedom. It meant the total cancellation of debts and the release of debt slaves back to their families and their original lands. Teshub is commanding the elite of Ebla and their underworld backers to wipe the slate completely clean.
I'll play the voice of the opposition here, because the elites of Ebla push back hard. They respond to the storm god with pure, terrified economic anxiety. They say, if we erase all the debts and we free all the people who are currently tied to our estates, who's going to work our fields? How will we maintain our wealth? How will we eat?
They are terrified of losing their foundation.
They are basically throwing the grinding stones argument right back at Teshub, saying that if they lose their free labor, the economy will collapse.
But Teshub is completely unmoved by their profit margins. He sees the broader causality that they are ignoring. This leads to the climax of the text, that moment we talked about at the beginning. It's incredibly dramatic. Teshub slams his fist down on the banquet table so hard the heavens shake.
He issues a terrifying, uncompromising threat to the rulers of Ebla.
He tells them, if you refuse to grant the people their freedom, if you do not cancel these crushing debts, the fields themselves will cease to grow crops. They will grow nothing but thorns and weeds.
That is a chilling image. He isn't threatening to strike them with a lightning bolt. He is threatening the very soil they stand on.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's a revolutionary concept for the ancient world. Teshub is directly linking the physical, agricultural prosperity of the land to the social justice of its people. The Kasafi contains a line that encapsulates this perfectly. It says, the sigh of the people will destroy your prosperity.
The sigh of the people. That is haunting. It's this idea that the collective despair and suffering of the working class isn't just a political problem, it's a toxic force that will literally poison the roots of the crops.
We are looking at one of the earliest recorded debates on social justice. Teshub is laying down a cosmic law that an economy built on inescapable debt is inherently cursed. The elite are panicking about who will plow the fields if the slaves are freed, but the storm god is pointing out that if the slaves aren't freed, the fields will refuse to yield entirely.
There is no long-term survival without equity.
Exactly. The land will reject a corrupt society.
So what does this all mean? This brings the entire architecture of the deep dive together beautifully. If we connect the divine banquet all the way back to the deer and the stone, the text is basically telling the king of Ebla that he is the deer.
That is the exact synthesis this ancient wisdom demands.
Think about it. The deer trips because of its own recklessness, but tries to blame the stone. The text establishes that this is foolish. Now, scale that up to a monarch. If a king refuses to forgive debts, if he oppresses his citizens until they break, and then his kingdom falls into ruin, If the crops fail, the economy shatters, and invaders breach the walls, he cannot blame the gods.
He cannot blame bad weather or bad luck or fate,
He cannot blame the stone.
because his own failure to provide justice was the direct cause of the collapse. The Song of Release argues that systemic fairness isn't just some lofty, charitable ideal. It is the fundamental physics of a functional society. Just as the owner needs the grinding stone to eat, the elite need a healthy, unburdened populace to thrive.
If you squeeze the people until they have nothing left, the foundation crumbles and the capstone falls.
You simply cannot separate material abundance from moral justice.
It completely shatters the historical stereotype we started with. We are so used to viewing the Hittites through the lens of their military conquests, assuming they were just pragmatic, ruthless empire builders. But the Kasafi proves that beneath that militaristic exterior, they possessed a profound, agonizing social conscience.
They were sitting around in Anatolia in 1400 BC, pressing cuneiform into clay, worrying about the exact same things we worry about today.
They were debating the crushing burden of debt, the fairness of economic systems, the reality of free will, and what happens to a civilization when the gap between the ultra-rich and the working poor becomes an unbridgeable chasm.
They understood, perhaps better than many later civilizations, that an empire isn't judged solely by the height of its walls or the sharpness of its bronze, but by the weight of the chains on its lowest citizens. The tablets found in Hattusa aren't just administrative ledgers and peace treaties. They are the enduring evidence of a society wrestling with the very soul of humanity.
It is genuinely incredible. Well, thank you for joining us on this journey back to ancient Anatolia and for stepping through the ruined gates of Hattusa with us today. It is wild to think that a few simple stories, a clumsy deer stubbing its toe in the mountains, a tired millstone complaining to a baker, could crack open such a massive, sophisticated debate on freedom, fate, and justice. It goes to show that human nature and our struggle to build a fair world hasn't actually changed all that much in 3.5 millennia.
The tools change, but the human condition remains the same. And I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over as you go about your day. We saw how the Hittite texts argued that a society's literal survival, the very fertility of its soil, depended entirely on wiping away the crushing debts of its lowest classes. If the ancient gods viewed systemic debt forgiveness not as an act of charity, but as a mandatory, recurring requirement to prevent a nation from collapsing into thorns and weeds, what does that say about how we measure the true health of our own economic systems today? Are we building our wealth on fertile, sustainable soil, or are we just waiting for the thorns?
If this journey into the ancient world moved you, share this legend with a fellow traveler. Until we meet again to trace the footprints of the past, stay wise, stay curious. Goodbye for now.